There's about 3-4 years ago, I was promoting one of the Tekken movies.
Right.
The Steven Seagal. This journalist suddenly said, hey, what do you think of Steven Seagal saying you don't know how to punch?
It's hard to imagine now, but in the late 80s and early 90s, Steven Seagal was one of the biggest action stars on the planet. With his slicked-back ponytail, stoic glare, and lightning-fast Aikido moves, he was a new kind of hero. Movies like Above the Law, Hard to Kill, and the smash hit Under Siege were huge, earning hundreds of millions and cementing his image as an absolute, untouchable tough guy. But while fans were cheering in the theaters, a completely different story was being told on set. It turns out, many of his co-stars and colleagues didn't see a hero. They saw a bully, an egomaniac, and someone whose on-screen persona bled into real life in the worst ways possible. For the last 3 decades, stories have been trickling out of Hollywood, and they all paint a picture of a man who is almost universally despised by anyone who's had to work with him. So today, we're looking at the on-set feuds, the professional beefs, and the seriously disturbing allegations that turned Steven Seagal from a box office king into a Hollywood outcast. The list of people who have publicly gone after Seagal is long, from celebrated actors and fellow action legends to some of comedy's biggest names. We're talking physical fights, bizarre demands, and the one incident that got him banned for life from one of TV's most famous shows. This isn't just about his movies. It's about the trail of burned bridges and bitter enemies he left behind. For most actors, a film set is a creative space where everyone works together. For Steven Seagal, it was apparently his personal kingdom, where he was the king and everyone else was just there to serve him. This attitude didn't just annoy people. It led to actual physical fights and a reputation for being nearly impossible to work with. Probably the most legendary story of Seagal's on-set aggression comes from the amazing John Leguizamo. They were both in the 1996 thriller Executive Decision, the movie famous for killing off Seagal's character in the first 20 minutes. According to Leguizamo, the trouble started on day 1. During the first rehearsal with the whole cast, including Kurt Russell and Halle Berry, Seagal apparently announced to everyone, "I'm in command. What I say is law." Leguizamo, who's never been afraid to speak his mind, thought this was hilarious and let out a laugh. As he later said, "Who comes into rehearsal and says that ST?" Well, Seagal did not find it funny. Leguizamo says Seagal, a supposed master of a defensive martial art, went on the attack. He allegedly elbowed Leguizamo and slammed him against a brick wall, knocking the wind out of him. The much bigger Seagal then got in his face and asked, "You got a problem with that?" It was a shocking welcome to the real Steven Seagal and became a perfect example of his thin skin and willingness to get physical over something as small as a laugh. But it wasn't just about physical intimidation. Just ask acclaimed Scottish actor Brian Cox. Cox, who you probably know from the hit show Succession, had the misfortune of working with Seagal on the 1996 film The Glimmer Man. In his fantastic 2021 memoir, Cox did not hold back. He didn't just say Seagal was difficult. He said the man was a walking joke. Steven Seagal is as ludicrous in real life as he appears on screen, Cox wrote. He described Seagal as being wrapped up in his own self-importance, faking a bizarre spiritual vibe. He radiates a studied serenity, as though he's on a higher plane to the rest of us, Cox noted, before landing the killer blow. And while he's certainly on a different plane, no doubt about that, it's probably not a higher one. Cox's biggest issue was Seagal's complete lack of professionalism. He recalled how Seagal would refuse to do the basic actor courtesy of reading his lines off camera for his scene partners. It was so unprofessional that the director had to warn Cox about it. Cox, however, was just relieved, joking that having Seagal read lines would have just been a distraction anyway. For an actor like Cox, Seagal wasn't just a bad co-worker. He was a living caricature who actually bought into his own myth. This kind of behavior was there from the very beginning. Sharon Stone was in Seagal's first movie, Above the Law, back in 1988. She was still an up-and-coming actress, and he was the new action star. Even then, his ego was out of control. For years, Stone didn't say much about it, but her feelings were pretty clear. In a 1999 interview, when a reporter asked about Seagal, she delivered an ice-cold shutdown. Steven Seagal is an individual who isn't worth the ink it would take to write about him. Decades later, in her memoir, she shared a quick story that explained everything. During the shoot for Above the Law, Seagal actually told her off for standing too close to him because she was in his chi. Just like Brian Cox, Stone saw a man who was not only difficult, but ridiculously self-absorbed. She hated working with him so much that when producers wanted to cast him in The Specialist, she flat out refused, and the part went to Sylvester Stallone instead. The entire Steven Seagal brand is built on one thing: his supposed mastery of martial arts. He wasn't just an actor, he was, to his fans, the real deal. But if you ask legitimate fighters and other action stars, that claim has been a source of mockery and anger for decades. A lot of his peers don't just dislike him as a person, they're offended by what they see as a fake martial arts persona. The most famous feud here is between Seagal and the muscles from Brussels, Jean-Claude Van Damme. In the early 90s, they were direct rivals. Seagal started it by questioning in an interview if Van Damme was ever a real karate champion. That kicked off a feud that exploded at a party at Sylvester Stallone's Miami mansion in 1997. Stallone has told the story himself many times. Van Damme was sick of hearing Seagal claim he could destroy him, so he challenged Seagal to a fight right then and there. Van Damme was tired of Seagal claiming he could kick his ass, Stallone said, so he offered Seagal outside into my backyard. And what did Seagal do? The man who built a career on being an unbeatable warrior apparently made his excuses and left the party, but Van Damme wasn't done. Stallone described him as berserk, saying Van Damme hunted Seagal down at a nightclub and challenged him again. And again, Seagal dodged the fight. The story became an instant Hollywood legend, the moment that, for many, proved Seagal's tough guy act was just that, an act. He could talk the talk, but when a real fighter called him out, he walked fast. Forward a few decades, and a new generation of action stars feels the same way. Charlize Theron, who has more than proven her action credentials in movies like Mad Max, Fury Road, and Atomic Blonde, has been especially harsh. In a famous interview with Howard Stern, she let it all out. At night, I'll go online to watch fighters, and you always come across that odd Seagal video of him fighting in Japan, but he really isn't, she said, laughing. She then mocked his physical state and his so-called technique. He's just incredibly overweight and pushing people. He's shoving people by the face, it's a whole setup. But her criticism wasn't just about his skills, it was personal. She justified it by adding, I have no problem talking tea about him because he's not very nice to women. So, f*** you. That feeling is shared all over the stunt community. The people paid to make actors look cool. Most stunt professionals stay quiet, but the Seagal stories are so bad that many have broken their silence. The general opinion is that Seagal wasn't just difficult, he was dangerous. Martial arts actor Michael Jai White, who worked with him on Exit Wounds, said Seagal has a reputation for hurting stuntmen on purpose. He'd use too much force, knowing the performers couldn't really complain without risking their jobs. The late DMX, another co-star on that film, backed this up, saying flatly that Seagal had a habit of hurting people for real during filming. But the most humiliating story about Seagal's fighting credibility involves a true legend of the stunt world, judo, Gene LeBell. LeBell was a giant in the industry who trained everyone from Bruce Lee to Chuck Norris. The story goes that on the set of Seagal's movie Out for Justice, Seagal was bragging that because of his Aikido skills, he was immune to chokeholds. LeBell, a man who knew more about fighting than Seagal could ever dream of, decided to call his bluff. He accepted the challenge. According to the story, LeBell immediately got Seagal in a chokehold, and Seagal passed out. But here's the most infamous part of the story. The loss of consciousness supposedly caused Seagal to have a very embarrassing accident in his pants. Seagal denies it, But the story is legendary in martial arts circles. MMA star Ronda Rousey, who trained under LeBell, has said she believes the story is true, adding, "I would beat the crap out of Steven Seagal. I would have to make him crap his pants a second time." The stories about on-set fights and a massive ego are bad enough, but they don't even compare to the darker allegations that have followed Steven Seagal for decades. A disturbing number of women, many of them young actresses just starting out, have come forward with stories of sexual harassment and assault. Seagal has denied all of it, but these accounts paint a grim picture of a predator who allegedly used his power to intimidate and exploit women. It's these stories that explain why people like Charlize Theron have such genuine contempt for him. One of the most detailed and chilling accounts came from Emmy-winning actress Juliana Margulies. In 2017, she described a horrific encounter from 1991, when she was 23 and auditioning for Out for Justice. A female casting director called her late at night, saying, Seagal wanted to run lines with her in his hotel room. Margulies was hesitant, but the casting director promised she'd be there too. When Margulies got to the hotel, the casting director was gone. It was just Seagal. Things got terrifying fast. As she sat down, she felt something hard under the couch cushion. Seagal casually said, Oh, that's my... Sorry, I must have left my gun there, and pulled out a large pistol. Margulies had never seen a real gun before and was terrified. He then allegedly tried to get her into the bedroom, saying he was a healer and wanted to read her palm. She realized the danger she was in and, as she put it, screamed her way out of the room. She concluded that Seagal was a predator who targeted young actresses. Her story is shockingly similar to one told by Jenny McCarthy about her audition for Under Siege 2. She said she walked in to find only Seagal in the room. He allegedly told her to sit next to him on a sofa, and when she refused, he told her the part required nudity and demanded she take off her clothes so he could see her body, even though there were no nude scenes in her role. McCarthy ran out of the audition in horror, but says Seagal followed her, warning her not to tell anyone what happened. The pattern continues with Arrested Development star Portia de Rossi. She shared that, for her final audition for a Seagal movie, he had her come to his office. He told me how important it was to have chemistry off-screen, she wrote, as he sat me down and unzipped his leather pants. De Rossi ran out and called her agent, whose response was just as awful. Well, I didn't know if he was your type. The story shows not just Seagal's alleged behavior, but the system that let it happen. And there are more. Actress Rae Dawn Chong claimed Seagal answered the door for an audition wearing only a bathrobe and later exposed himself. Reporter Lisa Guerrero said Seagal met her at his home in a silk robe and offered her a lead role in exchange for a private rehearsal. And in one of the most serious accusations, actress Regina Simons accused Seagal of raping her in 1993 when she was an 18-year-old extra at what she thought was a rap party. While Seagal has denied everything, the sheer volume and consistency of the stories are impossible to ignore. Of all the stories about how difficult Steven Seagal is, none is more public or more telling than his disastrous hosting gig on Saturday Night Live. In April 1991, at the absolute height of his fame, Seagal hosted the show. What followed was a legendary train wreck, a week so terrible for the cast and crew that it got him a lifetime ban and the title of the show's worst host ever. The problem was simple. To host SNL, you have to be willing to make fun of yourself. That was a concept Seagal just could not grasp. Cast members and writers from that time said he had zero sense of humor. Writer Bob Odenkirk recalled that Seagal genuinely seemed to think he was a comedy genius. He kept pitching his own sketch ideas, and they were all painfully unfunny. One idea involved him playing a therapist who gets sexual with a patient played by Victoria Jackson, a sketch that was more creepy than comedic. He was also rude and critical to the people trying to help him. Cast member Tim Meadows said, he just wasn't funny, and he was very critical of the cast and the writing staff. He didn't realize that you can't tell somebody they're stupid on Wednesday and expect them to continue writing for you on Saturday. Seagal's main complaint was that the writers were making him look weak. He refused to do any sketch that poked fun at his tough guy image. The peak of the week's insanity came during a rehearsal for a Hans and Franz sketch. Dana Carvey and Kevin Nealon were going to talk about how they could easily beat up Steven Seagal. Seagal was so personally offended by the idea that he could be beaten, even in a comedy sketch, that he reportedly stormed off and locked himself in his dressing room. Things got so bad that the producers almost canceled the live show and aired a rerun. The show did happen, but it was a dud. Seagal was wooden, his timing was awful, and you could practically feel his contempt for everyone through the screen. The whole experience left such a bad taste that showrunner Lorne Michaels, a man who has worked with almost every celebrity alive, personally banned Seagal for life. The ban even became a running joke on the show. A year later, Nicolas Cage was hosting and joked that the audience might think he was the biggest jerk who's ever been on the show. From the control room, Lorne Michaels' voice came over the speaker for everyone to hear. No, that would be Steven Seagal. When you put all the pieces together, the story of Steven Seagal is pretty clear. His downfall wasn't because his movies stopped being popular. It was because of a pattern of behavior that alienated almost everyone he worked with. The stories from the last 30-plus years are just incredibly consistent. We have actors like John Leguizamo, who was allegedly physically assaulted for laughing. We have respected pros like Brian Cox, who basically called him an unprofessional joke. We have fellow action stars like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Charlize Theron, who openly mock the very foundation of his career, his martial arts skill. His reputation in the stunt community is that of a dangerous bully, and underneath all that is the much darker layer of disturbing allegations from women like Juliana Margulies, Jenny McCarthy, and Portia de Rossi, who have shared traumatic stories of alleged harassment and intimidation. Then you top it all off with the Saturday Night Live disaster, a public meltdown of an ego so fragile it couldn't take a single joke, earning him the permanent title of worst host ever. Every story adds to the same picture. In the end, Steven Seagal's biggest fight wasn't with bad guys on screen, but with his own reputation, and that's a fight he clearly lost. His career didn't just fade, it was pushed into exile by the sheer number of people he allegedly wronged. What do you think is the wildest Steven Seagal story? Is there anyone we missed? Let us know down in the comments. And if you want more stories about Hollywood's most notorious figures, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching.